So my name's Nadia. In 2010, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. I guess lucky enough for it to be stage 2, sort of rather than further advanced, but still serious enough to really have a huge impact on my life. Being 36 and being single at the time, it was, I guess not really what I was hoping to do with my life at that stage. And, the trauma and the stress of going through the diagnosis was obviously particularly difficult. Having not had children, it became pretty clear pretty well straight away that fertility was going to be probably one of my biggest challenges, and in terms of sort of, firstly, obviously needing to navigate the diagnosis, but then what are the costs of the diagnosis to myself, to my life, and to my future, and what does that mean, I guess, who am I, sort of, through the treatment, through the cancer, and then post-cancer as well. So with, great support networks from all of my medical team, from surgeons to then chemo, radio, and then a lot of holistic help that I did for myself, and a good support network with my family, I went from being, an independent, self-sufficient, single income family of my own to not having, or luckily enough not needing to work straight away because I had some insurance that could cover it, but then having my mum move in with me, losing all ability to sort of really sort of basically be independent and have the ability to sort of really just be, I guess, sufficient and proficient with what my lifestyle was for, which was social, it was active with friends, family, various relationships. And then so the change at that stage was very difficult, and I guess the loss of independence and then what that then meant to, how that changed who I was and how I navigate through that process. And I guess one of the first things was, accepting a scar that went, from your belly button sort of all the way down, and thinking, okay, so my body is changing dramatically, and how do I then engage with this body going forward when it's not doing what I want it to do, or I can't even walk around the block without being in pain after surgery. And, I've people 2 or 3 times my age can lap me in the park while I'm just walking very slowly. So all of those physical issues plus all of the sort of emotional issues were, pretty active from the start, from diagnosis through surgery, through treatment. And yeah, I guess, bunkered down and just tried to get through as best I could, and I could definitely see emotionally I was unraveling by the end of it. So by the time I physically finished all my treatment, I sought help with a psycho-oncologist, and that was really quite wonderful to normalise, I guess, my existence and my life, and help me figure out how to go on, and I guess how to sort of start to, I guess, bring things to the forefront, like how do I actually, get over the fear of recurrence, how do I actually get over, what's happened to my body and the fact that I've lost trust in my body and what I can do, or what its boundaries, and then more importantly, what does that mean for me going forward as a single person who wants to be in a relationship? What sort of, person would want someone who couldn't have children? So all of those things became, even now, 7 years later, really quite emotional to deal with. And it's that fertility issue and that who would want me now issue, and also the sort of, I guess, people I was dating pre to post would also be quite different, because I was also quite different. So there was lots of confusion and lots of uncertainty and a lot of questions based around, at the core, the intimate relationship firstly with myself, and then my desire to, move on from that point as well. So it's been a challenging, part of my life, and it's been a really difficult thing to navigate. I still feel the grief and the loss for my fertility, which, has been forefront, and in, a year or two post all the treatment, thinking, okay, I actually want to be in a relationship. How does that look? How do I look? How do I present? I tried internet dating, which was just a huge failure for me, and tried thinking, okay, so the sort of men that I want to look at, or the sort of relationship I want to be in, who would that be? How does that you know, and it all just kept coming back to, for me, you know, what does the relationship look like in the future? Because I was confident that I wanted one, and I wanted to be in a relationship not because I was afraid to be alone, but because I wanted to share my life. But I also knew that sharing my life with someone who wanted children meant that I would also be leaving myself open to rejection, because that was something that was not going to be possible for me without huge medical intervention or huge, you know, amount of work in terms of adoption, and it just felt all too much. And then, you know, in the mix of all of that, sort of, you know, I guess getting on HRT, the sort of, you know, basically control sort of the menopause phase of my life that I didn't want to sort of quite get into at the same time. So it was all very complicated and, you know, very overwhelming through that whole process. And I think it just kept coming back to addressing one step at a time, you know, what would make me happy, what do I need to do for me, and what's the relationship like with myself first, and then how does that create a relationship with someone in the future, and then how do I navigate that, and then how do I navigate when we do finally, you know, want to be intimate, how does that feel with my body being different, and how does that feel if then I get rejected because they're wanting a family and I couldn't. So I definitely had, you know, that really crazy dialogue going on in my mind about all of that, and that really crazy dialogue going on, you know, and also rejection through all of that. That was quite challenging to bear. Yeah, so for me, this topic, I guess, is very close to my heart, because it's really been one of the biggest challenges in what has changed in my life, you know, because of my diagnosis and because of, you know, surgery that I opted to have, that then really changed what was going to happen to me going forward. You know, fast forward a few years later, and, you know, a friend introduced me to someone, and we started dating and talking and stuff, and he was very upfront at the start that he didn't want kids, and because he already had a family, and I really respected and really valued his honesty with me from the start, that if I wanted to pursue children, then we should just not pursue our relationship. And that was a really pivotal point for me in terms of thinking, okay, so, you know, by that stage I was probably getting close to 38, 39, and I'm thinking, what does this mean for me going forward? And maybe in this life children aren't meant for me, so if I let go of that for me, not for anyone else, and then I move forward into what could be potentially a good relationship, what does that mean then for me in my life? And yeah, and, you know, now I've got lots of dogs, so they're my little fur babies, and that makes a big difference. And, you know, my partner and I are still together from that point, but I don't feel I'm with him because I've compromised or he's compromised, but I feel like we had a very mature and very honest discussion really early on about what are the not negotiables for us in terms of sustaining. So there's no resentment and there's no feeling of missing out. And then as our relationship progressed and as I started to feel safer with him and more sure in myself and my body, then I think the real healing for my body and for myself and my soul continued, and I think still does continue to now. So I guess that's my story in a nutshell, and how, you know, this diagnosis has really shaped sort of, you know, the last 7 or 8 years of my life, and how it's going to probably continue to shape my life as I see my nieces and nephew grow up, and as I keep trying to convince my partner to have more dogs at home so I can fulfill that need of being mother. And yeah, that feels sort of pretty well where I'm at, but it also feels like a really positive place from something that was really challenging and really confronting and so intimate, you know, so intimate on the deepest level as well, and just to move through.
Well, thank you so much, Nadia, for that fantastic presentation, and just for being so upfront and honest and open in sharing your story. We really, really appreciate it. So just one question that's come up, and just a reminder to those on the webinar, if you'd like to ask a question to our presenters, just in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little chat box, so just type it in there. So the question is, do you think that your experience would have been different if you'd had a partner when you were diagnosed?
Yeah, I think my experience would have been different, you know, with a partner and diagnosis because, you know, and I don't think that would have made it necessarily better or worse, but potentially at that stage we would have maybe already, I guess, assessed the issue of children or not children. So I think in my mind, if I'd had a partner earlier on in my life and I'd had children, then maybe that was my opportunity to have kids then versus, so, and I think that's probably, for me, other than physical support, that's really the big thing about not having a partner at that stage in my life and not sort of, you know, being able to have had children earlier or choosing to have children earlier or going forward as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much again. We really appreciate giving up your time